In the year 1215, the British citizens, after a protracted struggle, forced King John to sign the Magna Carta, a document which many consider the first constitution. In this document, the king would no longer be above the law, but most importantly, it would end arbitrary arrest and detention of the British citizens. In 1945, the nations of the world, under the framework of United Nations, they came together under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and made a solemn declaration to protect the human rights and freedoms. In Uganda, in 1995, under the Uganda Constitution, the framers, Ugandans, came together and said they will protect fundamental human rights and freedoms. Specifically, these rights are enshrined under Chapter 4 of the Constitution. The same Constitution put a big mandate on Parliament to play an oversight role, which includes making sure that the executive does not encroach on the protected human rights and freedoms. Now, on this show, we meet to ask a fundamental question. Is the Parliament of Uganda still capable of protecting the human rights and freedoms of Ugandans? This is against the backdrop of what has been happening in the country. We've all been watching stories where a lot of citizens have been arbitrarily arrested and detained, and some tortured in a gruesome manner. Welcome to the show. You are watching Focus on Parliament, and I'm your host, Hariss Akampulira. Now, do grab yourself a cup of coffee because I have a diverse and eminent panel of thought leaders in their respective areas who are going to take you on a thrilling discussion to unpack the questions that relate to our subject of discussion. These are practitioners, they are academics, they are civil society leaders who have a wealth of experience in the area of human rights. I couldn't be more honored to host them today. Ladies and gentlemen, you're very much welcome to Focus on Parliament.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And without further ado, I'll do the honors of introducing them. On my immediate left is Dr. Denis Musinguzi, who is a lecturer at Studies-Nkozi University teaching governance. Denis, you're most welcome to Focus on Parliament.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here. In the public, you call it Nkozi University, but its real name is Uganda Matters University.
Yes.
Whose main campus is located in Nkozi. Thank you.
All right. And how is the University of Nkozi?
Yesterday we were celebrating our 30th anniversary into existence.
Yeah.
We don't call it 30 years old because universities don't grow old. Universities
really?
keep new and renew themselves as they integrate knowledge. And we had
that's a nice way of looking at it, isn't it?
And that was the 29th graduation. It was a colorful and very successful event. Thank you.
Great. And next is a lady that most of you perhaps know, Charity Ahimbisibwe, who is the Executive Director at Electoral Laws and Governance Institute. Charity, good morning and welcome to Focus on Parliament.
A very good morning to all our viewers and looking forward to the discussion.
How is the Institute?
The Institute is now in conversations around the elections of 2026, but before then, we are looking at the LC1 elections and how to help political parties engage better in the process. So I am happy that we did a show here on LC1s and we asked the authorities to make sure they organize the elections, and here they are. So good work by CCG and Civic Space TV.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Next is Counsel Eron Kiiza, who is a lawyer and a human rights activist, popularly known as Counsel for the Defendant. Eron Kiiza, as you know, he's been at the forefront of fighting for human rights in and out of court. And we are grateful to have him on the show to share his insights. Counsel Eron Kiiza, good morning and welcome to the show.
Yeah, good morning to you and the listeners. It is my deep delight to be here. Just to correct you, you forgot that I am a crusading environmentalist.
Oh, you're a crusading environmentalist.
So to merely narrow my description. Conventional human rights.
Please do prepare.
His poem on ejaculation.
Oh, he has a poem on ejaculation.
Oh, my friend.
Oh, my goodness. Please do prepare. We shall spare you 2 minutes at the end of the show.
To recite the poem.
So, you recite the poem.
No, that poem should not be recited here. In view of...
The blessing has to be there at the scene of crime.
Speaking of rights, I think he has the right to recite his poem.
No, that poem is dangerous.
I am being censored by my own.
Read that poem yourself.
All right. Last but by no means the least is Counsel Benjamin Katana, who is also a lawyer and the National Treasurer for the National Unity Platform, NUP. In his circles, he's known as Comrade BK. Just like Kiiza Counsel Katana Benjamin has been at the forefront of the fight for the human rights, defense of the human rights and freedoms of Ugandans. Specifically, I think he's been in and out of the court-martial in light of the Ugandans who were arrested more than 3 years now. Counsel Katana Benjamin, it's indeed a pleasure to have you. Good morning and welcome to Focus on Parliament.
The pleasure is mine. Good morning to you, Hariss, and the viewers. Many thanks to Civic Space TV for the opportunity to share my views on the subject.
Great. How is the National Unity Platform? How are you holding up during these turbulent times? How do you maintain your coolness?
By the grace of God, we are managing.
By the grace of God.
Managing and progressing.
Indeed. And why don't we start with you, Katana? I mean, more than 800 years after the Magna Carta, we still have arbitrary arrests and detention of Ugandans. I mean, we have seen reports being presented in Parliament by the leader of opposition, but by other leaders, including your president, His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi, of people who have been missing for more than 2 years now. What does that make of us as a country? I mean, about 800 years ago, the British came and said, we can no longer tolerate anyone disappearing, any citizen of Britain disappearing or being, condemned without trial.
Well, thank you very much. The starting point is that human rights that include freedom from the various violations that you have mentioned and what has been happening in Uganda, especially the harassment, the torture of those that have divergent views from those of the person running the country and those that support him, is not a new thing in Uganda.
Yeah.
And it has various aspects of looking at it. Number one is the structure of the state of Uganda, where I believe that we are still in the process of state formation by all standards. But that on the advent of colonial rule, you have the British or the Crown setting up their enterprise You have the governor on behalf of Her Majesty's government. The governor has the army, has the police, has the civil society, the clerks they had, and what have you. And the role of this structure is to enable the colonial administration extract as much as they can from the people of Uganda, of this territory. And to help the governor whip the citizens into line. And so even when we attained independence in 1962, at different turns, there has been an attempt to correct this through constitutional making processes. And the latest being the process that led to the promulgation of the 1995 Constitution. What you would call that say Ugandans were trying to set a minimum national consensus on how this country should be managed. That you have the executive, you have the judiciary, you have the parliament, and that each one of them has elaborate rules, but also most importantly, that you legislate on issues like separation of powers, checks and balances. That, for example, Parliament should be able to check the excesses of the executive. That when the executive, like it has been the case, violates human rights, engages in any excesses, be it in the social context, be it in the political context, be it in the economic context, that Parliament is able to call them to order. And that if you're offended by these actions of the executive, you can even go to court. There's the judiciary. But you see, with that consensus, we have had a challenge of having a leadership that has absolute control on all these state institutions. And this is not unique. And this is why we have been saying that in Uganda, we are involved in a process of liberating the country from dictatorial rule to a democratic rule. Because the dictatorship, many people when we come here and say dictatorship, they say, but you go on TV and speak. But you cannot reduce that concept to speaking on TV or speaking on radio. It is about absolute control over state institutions, and there are no checks and balances. So you find that the leader we have today, who is General Museveni, determines what happens in Parliament, determines what happens in the judiciary, determines what happens in the... So there has been a fusion of the individual and the state of Uganda. In fact, the state has been reduced into an individual.
I'm saying we have more or less like what we had in 1902 when the governor was the legislature.
More or less.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah.
Because when you want something, when you want money given to Pinetti, he will call the NRM caucus. All those people that have been making noise, he says, this is what I want. And so, with that fusion, when Hariss identifies himself as someone who does not agree with the views of this individual who has become the state of Uganda, then Hariss, in effect, becomes an enemy of the state of Uganda. And you're treated in a similar manner a terrorist is treated. So that's why you see that there is gross violation of human rights, especially targeting those that are perceived or are against the president. The other aspect is that dictatorships by their nature survive largely on fear. And the word that stands between them and the population they oppress is fear. Now, how do you entrench that fear? By projecting capacity to kill, capacity to injure, capacity to deprive, and all sorts of violations. That's why when you will be feared, and the people who are dissatisfied with the poor roads There's a terrible stretch between here, Nigeria and Chile, but people cannot even protest because they fear. So for the regime to be able to maintain that fear and therefore maintain control over the population, they must engage in violation of human rights. Now, these violations are part of what sustains the regime in power. So when you have the regime in power and the one that pretends over it, having control over parliament, then parliament and its leadership cannot stand up to the executive and the individual in these excesses because they know that this is the lifeline of the regime and by extension their lifeline. So that disempowers parliament and its independence remains an academic affair. That when you read in the law books, they say we have an independent parliament, but you know very well that it is the head of executive who determines who becomes the speaker. And I'm sure the speaker and his deputy are aware that they do not occupy those positions on account of popular support, but on account of the wishes of the president. The same applies to everyone else leading a state institution. And it is also common knowledge that you cannot bite the hand that feeds you. So these people, because they know when they contested previously and they did not have his blessings, they hit walls until he called the caucus and said, we have harmonized. These are the ones we want. So you cannot expect this parliament to play any role in guarding the people of Uganda against the excesses of the regime. Because the question you need to ask yourself is, who is violating the rights of Ugandans? It is not the church, it is not the civil society, it is largely security agencies. Which security agencies, drawing from the narrative I already gave, have been drawn into a partisan contestation of power on the side of General Museveni. So for them, that's why you see, these days they arrest a number of NUP supporters. And when they are giving them bond, they say subversive activities. An offense that does not exist in our laws, and subversive activities in their nature, you are talking about things like treason. So for them, contesting against the president or holding views different from his qualifies you to be treated as an enemy of the state, not as an opponent. So I think that gives us the context of why Parliament is a lambda.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Council BK. I mean, you draw for us a very important historical and political context within which we are to evaluate the protection of human rights and freedoms by Parliament. Let me bring you in, Council Eron. You've had BK, and further to contextualize our conversation, I don't want us to take it for granted that our viewers truly appreciate what we mean when we talk about protected human rights and freedoms. Could you please define these concepts for us so that we are on the same footing with our viewers?
We are saying that human rights are entitlements that every human being, by virtue of being a human being, is entitled to. And these include basic freedoms like the right to habeas corpus. That should be very important, especially if you are belonging to the political position. It's a non-derogable right. So if you are in illegal detention, there is a legal remedy called habeas corpus. Normally lawyers know about it, so someone like a BK goes to court and gets a court order, and the military should release you dead or alive, so that the legality of your detention is tested. You have freedom from torture, because from the time you are born, you don't need to be in America, in Somalia or Uganda, regardless of where you are. You are not supposed to be tortured, treated with cruelty, or in a degrading or inhuman manner. You are entitled to human dignity. And some of these types of rights, normally called civil and political rights, they help us, among other things, so that we do not reduce life into a crude contest. We don't, they reflect humanity's resolve to move further, to progress, and resolve things through order rather than using force, brute force. There are some of the things that distinguish us from animals. And when you say government violating human rights, you know it is behaving like a wild animal. Yes. Some of the rights, again, the freedom of expression, civic rights to participate in decision making, and to associate, to hold rallies, to assemble peacefully, to petition, such as the IGG. They really are very important because they help citizens have a voice. Yeah, they are very important for things like civic space, for things like political engagement. Yeah, without those civil liberties, without assembly rights, as long as you are non-violent, without those rights, we may not be able to have political parties, for instance. We may not have trade unions. We may not have all sorts of political, but also economic associations. So human rights are very important for the politics to be good, but they are equally important to fix the economy. And together, human rights, they help a country to develop. They help a country to even make scientific innovations. So do not buy into the propaganda of regime spin doctors saying that human rights is something for foreigners, that human rights is a peripheral matter, that we need to first concentrate. No, even things like food, water, environment, very basic that you really need for practical daily use, human rights matters. And all of them work to improve the welfare of the human being, to ensure that he has dignity, that he has respect, and so on and so forth. I hope I have given some light.
Yes, you have. Government has argued that human rights are not absolute, and specifically in respect of the arrests that have been done and the detention that have been done, especially in respect of the NUP supporters, that are done within the constitutional framework to protect the rest of the
Before you
citizens.
even finish, there is no constitutional framework for torturing Ugandans. So whichever framework that the regime is using to torture our people, it is foreign, it is sabotage, it is unpatriotic. I therefore use this opportunity to urge President Museveni to command his people to be patriotic, to read the constitution, and acknowledge with me and the rest of us here that even some human rights are beyond suspension, are actually absolute. It's not every human right that you can limit. So specifically in our local context here, the freedom from torture, cruelty, or inhuman and degrading treatment is absolute. You can't limit it, even in times of war.
Very good.
The right to a habeas corpus, that if there is an illegal detention or a military detention or whatever, I should rush to court and be released. So, or the legality of my detention question by stakeholders, including court, the right not to enslave me. You cannot start turn me into a slave. That is absolute. You can no longer.
But speaking of habeas corpus, Council Eron, is it still effective in Uganda? Because
incidentally, to your surprise, it is effective largely, and it is.
I don't know if Katana Council would say the same in light of the numerous applications that have been made recently by your party in respect of some of the disappearances of your supporters.
On many occasions, it has built pressure. They actually don't honor the orders and produce the people in court. But here is the context. So they arrest the person in the middle of the night. Nobody knows where they have taken him. The family is not aware. The lawyers are not aware. Nobody is aware. They hold them incommunicado. And so when you go to court, they will say you first go to police, give it this batch time. So eventually when you apply and serve them, that's after like 2 weeks. Especially like after elections, people would be dropped in the middle of the night in different places. Recently, what happens is that they just now transfer them from CMI, they take them to SIU and give them a bond with a charge of subversive activities. But there are some cases where they have ignored that. And there's even a recent case of Kawuya. The order was given maybe a month ago, but the man is still in detention. But maybe also, now that you have given me that opportunity, there is no way the regime can talk about a constitutional framework of doing enforcement. You see, the constitutional framework prescribes how arrests are conducted. It prescribes how you treat people that have been arrested. It gives you 48 hours to either give them bond or present them in court, subject them to a trial. Now, all these cases that we have had, actually the problems have not started with NUP. You remember the PRA people, the fictitious PRA people who were arrested. You remember the several charges that Dr. Besjo was held on, the several charges that Bobi Wine has been held on, but there is never trial. You remember the Arua saga? A trial has never been conducted. So you arrest people, torture them, release them, and then you say the state has a right to arrest. Yes, you have a right to arrest, but that right must be exercised in accordance with the law.
Very good. Eron, in 30 seconds, please conclude your point. I would like to bring in Charity.
So we are clear on the rights that cannot be limited, that are really so fundamental, that the law and across the world say that even in war, you must have them. There are rights which are in a category that can be limited, but the limitations are themselves limited, like BK and I were discussing.
But you forgot the fourth right. You gave 3 rights.
Okay, so fair hearing,
Exactly.
Fair hearing.
which encapsulates due process, guarantees, and ensure that what they use to say that towuliriza gwachi.
Don't pass judgment based on what you have heard from the one person before. So they say
both parties.
Meaning,
great.
So you hear from both sides. And fairly from both sides, you don't exhibit any form of bias. You ensure that they have enough time to prepare their defense, especially the ones who are being accused. You ensure that they know the case against them.
Great.
So that right is so fundamental that it can't be waived. But in the complex ways of Uganda, there is even a judge who recently suggested that for him, he knows circumstances in which it can be waived, but that is not in the Constitution. It is in his whims, dreams, and perspectives that are extra legal and beyond the Constitution. But those are only 4 out of an entire chapter 4 of fundamental human rights. They are all still inherent, all inalienable, but they are subject to reasonable restrictions. And in the speak of law, these restrictions must be those which are democratic, which are justified in a free and democratic society.
Fair enough.
They should be proportionate to the threat, and they should be publicly explained. So it is not something, there must be accountability in the way you go about it. There must be pressing need, and your response must be proportionate.
I'll definitely come back to you, Council Eron and Katana, specifically on the right to fair hearing and right protection from torture, in the context of what's happening within our country. But now let me bring in Charity. Lady Charity, there are arguments, especially by the government, that the opposition are ungrateful, that compared to the 1970s, that Honorable Katana and his group can come here and talk and they will go back to their families and speak. That in other words, there has been tremendous progress in terms of respect of human rights within under the NRM regime as compared to what was under the previous regime, specifically from 1970 to about 1980. What do you make of such argument?
I think the first place to demystify is the ungratefulness. Are they supposed to be grateful? Because at the end of the day, when you're in a political opposition or you have a divergent opinion, there is a reason why you're driven to have that opinion. And that is why that right to opinion is protected in Article 29, because it is recognized worldwide that there will always be divergent opinions. Now, on the premise of that, then the ungratefulness seems to be on a tingy ground. So we will not pursue the ground on being ungrateful. However, let us contextualize then what happened in the 70s and what is happening now, and whether there is significant progress in comparison with what happened. So in the 70s, during the time of Idi Amin, at least for what we have read, there was not too much of people speaking. Like you have seen the opposition comes out and speaks and goes home and sleeps. Of course, they would disappear. We had ministers who were arrested. And actually, the whole question of habeas corpus, you know, there was expert Matovu. In our historical perspective, he's the man who had gone disappearing until when they demanded that he be produced dead or alive. And up to now, scholars of law and historical perspective believe that ghost of expert is still living with us now, because there are many people who are still being arrested arbitrarily. Now, the second thing that we have seen this side with the NRM government is the institutions, that they established the institutions to promote democracy. So we have the constitution that was promulgated, and from that promulgation, then we have institutions like the Uganda Human Rights Commission. But you just saw what they did 2 or 3 days back, about a week back. They said we've closed files because NUP has failed to prove to us that there are people who are missing, and yet in 2021, the Minister of Internal Affairs appeared in Parliament and read a list of 177 people and said, as far as we're concerned, these are the ones we know are not yet accounted for. But now the Human Rights Commission, which is supposed to follow through as an entity that defends rights reports and says we are accounting for these lives, comes out and says, we have closed these files. We don't want to know what's going on with those files, whether they have disappeared, whether they are living now. It's up to the Ugandan who is watching us to judge whether then the team is ungrateful or there are still a number of issues that have to be dealt with. So we also can see institutions like the Parliament. From in the 1970s, actually, the Parliament was smaller than it is right now. And they seem to be committed to the cause of the people. Do we see the same commitment to the cause and agenda of citizens in this Parliament like it were in the 70s? I think that would again be a good question for academic consideration. I don't think there is sufficient evidence to show that today's Parliament is more in sync with the people than it was in the 1970s. If you look at the parliaments that came earlier, even before the promulgation of the 1995 Constitution, they seem to care more about the services to the people, education, health. Those were issues for them. We still have some of the schools that were established by Obote's regime that exist even now. Okay? We have many more that have been established by the NRM government, and we can't run away from that, because when the NRM took over, we had one university here. But now we have very many, almost 20 or so universities. Something that did not exist.
Close to 50 universities.
Are they close to 50? Really? From National Council?
I'm very sure Council Katana would be interested in the quality.
I don't think, no, even if the quality, you know, before we consider quality, there is an option of, we have opened the door for people to go to school. Yes. So at least we can't run away from that. Where we. So if they're close to 50, I can't deny an academician. Maybe you have the figure better, but yeah, so that is an achievement in itself. And it is a stark difference from the 1970s. And in terms of, therefore, the right to education, that those are the socio-economic rights, you see that now there is a shift, and a significant shift on that ground. But that doesn't mean that the state the civil liberties, and I think he talked about the civil and political rights. And I think for me, those are the most threatened. Right now, as we live in Uganda's democratic space, the biggest question which Parliament should be addressing itself to are the civil and political rights. They are under threat, and they are under maximum threat. The socio-economic rights remain lagging behind because of the population explosion and because there are 47, you see? Well, we're not yet at 50, but yes, we've done well. And secondary schools have also increased, yes. Okay. Health centers, we have not seen a lot of changes in hospitals. The hospitals that existed during the time of Obote and Amin are the same hospitals that we see now. What the NRM government
Except
did.
that now they can't deal with even a blackout of a minister in Kambuga.
They have to send him to on a plane to America. Anyway, that's the state in which you can compare the then and the now, and it is up to the person viewing us to choose which side they want to view it from. Is there a significant improvement that therefore shows the opposition as ungrateful and the citizens themselves, because they're the ones who are caught in this, more than just the opposition. But citizens are also caught.
Speaking specifically on political and civil rights, those who draw parallels between the 1970s and the now, would you agree that there has been a degeneration to that extent?
I think there's been an improvement, not a degeneration to that extent. There's been an improvement. And the improvement, I want to explain it. In the time of Obote and Amin, the army had superpowers. People used to run when they would find the army. Actually, the UPDF, when they came in, they were professionalized. And one of the things that had existed in this regime until 2021 was that people would freely walk on the streets near military men. That story began to change in 2021.
Charity, I was about to agree with you, but then quickly a picture of Ewan Kakwenza, Richard Basaisha, who is now in exile.
His cancer is here.
Yeah, his cancer is here. Came to my mind. Those gruesome.
No, before you go there, why are you giving her a benchmark of 70s? Because we know what happened. You want just NRM to get an easy win, because anyone could have improved from an Amin era, because even the government of Museveni agrees that even for Museveni he calls them swine. So why are you comparing our government with swine government?
Because actually there is a real conversation.
The other aspect is that in the constitutional making process, and when you look at the constitution that we have, much as it has been significantly reduced. The preamble, people of Uganda were making a commitment of never again to repeat that history. Never again. The checkered history of Uganda. And setting aspirations. So we should not judge ourselves by what we all renounce from, but by what we aspired to do and set standards. I think it's very, there is I want to borrow wisdom from Samuel Nyankole analogy. They say, that the baby carrier of a hyena, they say it is can't use it to carry it is prohibited to use it to carry a child. Then you say, but I use it to use it to carry the child who died. Maybe that's the reason the child died. So those governments that the NRM people want to compare themselves with, because of the atrocities they committed, it prompted resistance from the people of Uganda, and they removed them from power. So, by making a comparison with that, are they also calling for similar level?
Exactly. I mean, I hear you, and I agree with both of you. But the conversation is that the people who, of course, wouldn't want to go back, because I think that was our worst moment in some people's estimations. That was the worst. But the people who argue that we are almost back there.
There are cases that are comparable. For example, if you come from, I'll give an example, of Ankole. There were prominent people who were subjected to enforced disappearance. They will tell you, count the chiefs. They say there was a man called Delachi. I think you have read the book by the son. Disappeared.
Yeah.
They got the remains maybe after 30 years. Now we have families that do not know what happened to their people. Disappeared in 2019 up to now. The state is tight-lipped. Today they give you this story, the next day they will give you another story. And by the way, these problems have not just started. From say 2001, there has been degeneration. You remember the atrocities committed in Rukunjiri in 2001. You remember what happened here in Kampala in 2006, the incidents at Burangi and in other places.
2011.
Yes.
I mean,
so it has been a degeneration. And for me, I think because of that earlier analogy of the fusion and the army and the police and the rest, knowing that their job is to shield this person at whatever cost, it is irreversible.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we are moving on to Dr. Denis, but I wanted to highlight that because of the gruesome nature, because of the inhumanity, because of the great degrading character of acts like when you look at pictures like Kakwenza. I think it will take him lots of years to heal from that kind of experience. We looked at other horrible pictures from some NUP supporters. There's this gentleman, Maseruka from Kasese, Maseruka Samuel.
But do you know?
The legs were peeled. Those, I think, touch at the heart
if I could
of
just
the fabric of society, that thing that would like to collectively as a society protect. Yes, Eron.
But then we must remember that as a society we are testing our sanity because they are still members, including judicial officers and army officers who look at Bwambare, who look at Kakwenza and say that there is no torture. That this is propaganda.
Oh, really?
Which is
yes, the UPDF spokesperson.
Which is unfortunate.
That's unfortunate.
The name, the guy who had Masereka.
No, there is another gentleman that was lined up by the UPDF, Musigwa, with clear bands of a flat iron, was it?
Yeah. So people are playing games with our lives, with our dignity. So I think we need to check ourselves. We need to, as you say, it touches on the fabric, but this is a crude contest. It drags us back to prehistory, Precambrian times.
And I think that's why the drawing parallels with what was then is important. Denis, it is your time.
The drone has replaced the fidget.
Exactly.
Research
I mean, you are a researcher and you've heard from the practitioners. I would like to, in the interest of our viewers and in quest to make sure that we have a balanced show, want to hear your views from where you stand on the question whether there has been progress or degeneration in our pursuit of human rights and freedoms.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the people have discussed what human rights is and where it came from. But of course, in the conversation, when you hear people downplaying the centrality and importance of human rights, calling it foreign things, saying, no, for us, we are doing our politics, human rights can come later. You even see the environment of deception and bad will and complete deception. The subject, from the point of view of the human rights teacher, the concern for human rights has been at the center of civilization, even right before the birth of Jesus Christ. When you go to ancient Greece, the philosophers existed at the time when there was turmoil in the society, and they wanted to rebuild order. They were pushing for justice. They were pushing for equality.
And liberty.
They were pushing for liberties. And these are the fundamental foundations for human rights. When Jesus was born, he says, I came to give life and give it abundantly. Okay.
Very powerful.
Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Go to the sick, go to... So you see traces of human rights. As you've rightly put it, 1215, we see the King of England and the actor in the church, the Pope, signing the Magna Carta to protect the fundamental human rights as early as 1215 at the dawn of Renaissance. Unfortunately, Renaissance produced the two parallel situations that we are dealing with. As we came in, we were talking about scholars like Machiavelli and Thomas Hobbes, who are saying a leader should use force, a leader should be brutal, a leader should not respect morality, a leader should die a leader, and you know, that kind of narrative was created. But of course, at the dawn of English Enlightenment, we see other moderate scholars, whether it is John Locke, saying no, government must be limited because it goes there for and on behalf of the people. It is the people who elect the government, and when when a government falls short of the trust of the people should have the powers to recall that government. And that's why our constitution, Article number 1, indeed says power belongs to the people. So we begin to see that narrative. Of course, as we are talking about human rights, 1689, we see the English Declaration of Rights. And John Locke was talking about the right to liberty, the right to property, the right to life. The French scholars and revolutionaries, whether it is Voltaire or Rousseau, they're also talking about right to liberty, right to fraternity, and right to equality. So the concern for human rights has been that deeply entrenched. When we come to the creation of United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, our countries are signatories to the to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and they have accepted to be obliged. We are talking about civil and political rights. How did they come about? To implement the Universal Declaration, we went into the age of covenants, whether it is international covenant on civil and political rights or social and economic rights. And our governments, our signatories, have committed that they are going to respect civil and political rights, social and economic rights, and all other rights as we have them within our books. Indeed, they have talked about 60s and 70s. When it comes to 1986, the first 10 years of Museveni seem to be years of promise. Because immediately he comes in, he constitutes the Commission of Inquiry into Human Rights Violations from 1962 independence to 86, which gave birth to the Uganda Human Rights Commission, which he was talking about. There is that commitment. He went into educational review, he went into electoral, even constitutional review that gave us a constitution. Now, as Benjamin said, they are saying we have had a history of turmoil and what, we need to put that behind us. Even judging them on their own promise. On their own promise. You are not comparing them with something that they vowed to change. You get it? We can only judge them on their failure to actually fulfill their promise. Yes, people, I like Amin from an academic point of view. He said, I don't need parliament, I don't need cabinet. I will be the law and I will give decrees. He was as honest as that. Yes, some people died.
So you like the honesty?
The honesty.
For avoidance of doubt?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
That's not parliament.
Here we have people who are committing to give us human rights, to give us democracy, to give us the protection of fundamental freedoms, when practically they are a military dictatorship, disguising itself as a democracy with those elements of democratic pretense of the elections of our leaders of parliament, and the parliament which has been captured. Has there been a fundamental change? The fundamental change is in the litany of lies and unfulfilled promises. When soldiers, the Kawesa is shot dead, you don't know who's killed him. Kagezi is shot dead, we don't know who killed. Tabiriga is shot dead, we don't know who killed
Even
him.
the serving minister.
Even the serving minister. You remember women who were dying in Wakiso, in Entebbe, just close to the SFC base in Entebbe. And you do not see a government that is accounting for those people.
Just a moment, sorry to interrupt. Speaking about all those, I think, high-level incidences, we don't have any report that has ever been published on any.
No, not even a conviction.
We don't have any report.
Trial that has been conducted.
Not even Uganda Human Rights Commission having a report. They just state it
because if you think about
In
it
their
seriously,
reports,
it is a serious.
state of
And you know the examples he's giving.
Yeah.
These are high profile.
Yes, the high profile.
But there
I mean,
are several.
You can imagine how, especially the gruesome murder of Kawesi, and what? Yeah, Kawesi. It was so gruesome that it gripped the nation, and sent a lot of shock and fear waves across the country. So it is sad that up to now we have never had any report about who was
And you'll
responsible.
probably never have it.
Exactly.
Because the government doesn't believe in accounting to the citizens.
So what is the implicit conclusion to a neutral and ordinary citizen?
Yes, to a
What should be an ordinary, what should be the implicit conclusion from that?
That either
That
the
out of 10 high profile murders, there's no single report.
Yeah, it is two things. One, either the government is too incompetent
Okay.
to carry out an investigation, which I highly doubt, or the latter, which I highly believe,
Suspect.
is that it is complicit.
All
It
right.
is happy they died.
All right, I just wanted to highlight that. Please proceed.
Yes, so people died during Amin's time. Are they not dying in the current regime? They are dying. Even when we're talking about rights, we drew, the difference between the basic rights of food and health and what, and also the fundamental freedoms at a higher level. When people are dying in Karamoja of hunger and insecurity, you see the first basic and fundamental right is the right to life. And anything that compromises the right to life is itself a violation or an abuse of human rights. That some Ugandans are dying of hunger, yet we have, serious programs whose monies are swindled by the people in government. When we have no access to health care, when the monies that are supposed to be, providing medicine has been eaten by people. There was that fundamental case which we talked about of Katusi when he was sentencing Ted says Cheye. He said by diverting the money which was supposed to procure medicine for malaria and for tuberculosis, and the people are dying of the same diseases, you acted no less than a mass murderer.
Yeah.
You hear the standard we are talking about? When you swindle money, it's not just money disappearing.
You look at the effect.
When you look at the effect, these are mass murderers. So for me, this comparison of the 70s and the present, it is nonsensical, and sometimes it irritates the level of unseriousness and the level of taking people for granted. Yeah, as I've said, it is a military dictatorship disguising itself as a democracy.
Yeah.
And that's why even when there are fundamental questions of contestation, whether it's about inflation after elections, whether it is of course the surging commodity prices, I mean, you would expect that in a democratic space, you would call these people and say, okay, how do we deal with this problem? You have the leader of opposition. Can he put these things before Parliament and we see how to discuss them? Can you give us a report and we discuss it in the cabinet? But because we have a government which only pretends at democracy but effectively uses military, their easiest approach is to militarize even what is essentially a democratic contest. So then they are going to securitize a demonstration as a military threat, and instead of supplying a democratic solution, they want to put guns. So for them, guns is the answer, to everything. And that's why we're talking about people disappearing, people doing what, being tortured. I mean, even the ability to arrest and...
Hariss,
Yes.
one quick comment. The impression that the violation of human rights under the NRM government started maybe from 2001 is largely even misleading. You see, whenever the NRM government has been faced with rejection and dissent, the solution has always been violence and militarization. You remember the incidents of violation of human rights in northern Uganda when they were fighting Rakwena, when they were fighting Kony and LRA. These are documented. You remember the Mukura incident. Now, in those years, in the initial years of NRM government, it enjoyed massive support in the southern part, here in Uganda, in the west. So there was no need for them to resort to violence as a means of coercing people, whipping them into line. But they used violence in northern Uganda and eastern Uganda. Now that there has been emergence of dissent and rejection in this part of the country, they have resorted to their non-tested means of whipping the population into line.
And isn't it suspicious that wherever they are rejected, it is something of a civil war? When the North was against them, that was when we had the conflict. When Kasese rejected them, then whenever there is a rejection of this government, there is also almost coincidental.
We will return to that after the short break. We have a few minutes to our commercial break. But I wanted to give each one of you 1 minute. We've largely talked about the political and civil rights. I'd like a little bit to talk about the social, economic, and cultural rights. They're usually not highlighted as enough, yet they form the basis upon which citizens can demand for the political and cultural rights. So in 1945, I think this is the time when we had the first 3 blacks become members of parliament. At the time, I think it was logical. I think by speech by one Michael Ernest Kawadia Kagwa, he said that the parliament or the legislature at the time had 3 major responsibilities, which were elimination of poverty, ignorance
and disease.
Yes, I want your comment, each one of you, in a minute. How much progress you think we've made on that front, starting with you, Dr. Denis.
Poverty, even when percentages of progress are registered in Uganda, you'll find corresponding percentages of increases in poverty in some areas. Why? Because the concentration of the little economy we have is not in the hands of Ugandans. It is in the hands of foreign investors, in banks, in telecoms. So when you look at the total balance sheet, we seem to be making progress. But when you interrogate further and look at the other basic things of food and access to health and what, you realize we are still doing badly. And we still register malaria, the highest, the leading killer. And you wonder why we are not able to deal with malaria.
Okay.
So some progress, but
could have done better. Thank you very much, Charity.
So we still have poverty, ignorance, and disease. So 1945 is still with us today.
All right.
And I think there's a lot of effort that is needed to tackle the 3 major problems. And I would have expected that after 40 years, 38 years, I think now, NRM is going to make about 35, 36 years in power. There should have been significant change, especially on disease. But we still have people with jiggers. We still have toilet coverage in this country with people without pit latrines in their communities. It is still there in Uganda in the 21st century. Now that tells you then the question of poverty and disease is still a big issue. But like Dr. Denis has said, the money remains in the hands of a few. But supposing we had a mechanism of getting the communities to access the money economy for real, not out of words, like we've heard from governance and government experts. They keep talking about the poor will access the money economy, and they're now talking about 39% of those not in the money economy. But I really think that percentage is bigger than 39. It looks like about 45 to 50% are not yet in the money economy. Because talk about the people who live in slums just here in Kampala. Walk around the slum areas. You will not find decent toilets even in Kampala. And this is the capital city. Then there is a problem. So poverty, disease, and ignorance are still
so much so. All right, Councillor Eron.
Yeah, I agree with the previous speakers, and I just want to add that the NRM regime has championed sustained war on nature to the prejudice of the welfare, the economy of Ugandans. We have seen under them our forest cover reduced to alarming levels. The wetlands, you would think that NRM honchos are competing for them. There is no longer any wetland now in the city. At Busega, they are powering soil. And Museveni has just resorted to speeches like a civil society actor. You confuse him for a protester from Makerere University when he's talking about wetlands. You can't believe that he's the Sabarwanyi or that he's the president of Uganda. So we need a government that protects nature, that protects wetlands. That because without an environment, we cannot talk about any economy, and you can't even talk about human life. And you also know that there is a looming problem of the climate crisis, the pollution crisis, and the biodiversity loss. How are we going to confront those challenges without what they call nature-based solutions that come from trees, from forests, from national parks, from wetlands, from clean air? That's the health he was talking about. You cannot have a healthy life when you are in a lake of concrete or in a sea of compost.
Fair enough. BK.
Well, I think what the legislator, Kagwa, said in many words, he was talking about socio-economic transformation.
Exactly.
And I think one of the parameters, key parameters of socio-economic transformation is the quality of life of the people. Now, when you look at the journey that we have made, there has been some minimal progress and a lot of stagnation. And many times we make one step forward and two steps backwards. Because when you are talking about quality of life, then you are talking about how people eat, how they sleep, how they move, when they are unwell, how they are treated. So you realize we are now talking about the springing up of many schools. But what is the impact? You see, many times, maybe this in a response to economic growth or response to population growth? And you realize, for example, the current leader, Museveni, sat his primary school at Chamate and went to Ntare school. I don't think today a child of parents of similar means like Museveni's parents can leave Chamate and join Ntare school.
Incredible.
So are we progressing or retrogressing? Because the little progress that has taken place only benefits those that have means and those that have connections.
Indeed.
So are we progressing or retrogressing? Because you cannot measure the quality of life on the basis of those at the
top.
At the top.
Indeed.
So you
need to measure on the
here.
On
If you walk to that slum, just behind there, people cannot have 2 meals a day. They do not have decent accommodation. Their children cannot access affordable quality education. So we have a vicious cycle like we had 50 years ago of a poor person producing a poor person and that poor person also producing a poor person because there are no enabling factors for these people to progress from one step to another.
A vicious cycle of poverty, a poor person producing a poor person, and a cycle repeating itself. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for those thrilling thoughts. We are evaluating the progress and the role of Parliament in protecting and defending the human rights and freedoms in Uganda. So far, we have contextualized the conversation. When we return from the commercial break, we shall zoom in and focus on the role of Parliament. Do you think that your Parliament has potential or has so far done enough to protect your fundamental human rights and freedoms? You are watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV. Please don't go away. Stay with us. When we return, it will be another thrilling conversation.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back. You are watching Focus on Parliament, and we are interrogating the question whether Parliament of Uganda is still capable of protecting the human rights and freedoms of Ugandans. And with me in the studios, the distinguished panel of academics and practitioners, lawyers. On my immediate left, Dr. Denis, who is a lecturer at Uganda Matters University-Nkozi charity, Ahimbisibwe, who is the executive director at Electoral Reforms Institute, Counsel Eron Kiiza, aka Counsel for the Defendant, and Counsel Benjamin, aka Comrade BK. Welcome back to the show.
And secretary to the treasury.
and it's a weekend. That's important.
Yes,
that's
yes,
important that today is a Saturday, so
And my role is correct from
and give the party for national building.
that division is for the committee. Mine is
for the
fundraise.
Yours took powerful, very powerful. All right, let's now shift our gears to focusing on the role of Parliament in, engendering some of the human rights and freedom that we've already discussed here. And I would like to start with you, BK, because you're a member of the National Unity Platform, and your party members in the Parliament have been making headlines this week for one reason or the other. Some argue that they have been doing so in the defense of human rights and freedoms of their constituents. There are others who say that you sent not honorable enough members of Parliament. You already touched based on what you consider to be the role of Parliament. I mean, the context within which the Parliament operates. I'd like you to highlight that again, but also respond to critics who say that your honorable members of Parliament are really not following parliamentary procedure, and as such, they are doing the country disservice. And the decorum. Yeah.
I want to start from the point of role of Parliament. And I think we have all spoken in great detail about the historical role of Parliament in any democracy. What we have here in Uganda is a pseudo-democracy. And like Doctor explained, you have a military dictatorship that is doing PR for purposes of being able to attract some funding, or for purposes of of being accepted.
Being internationally correct.
Exactly, being internationally correct.
I have
So-
noted that. I think that's a powerful observation.
Yes. So they have a semblance of parliament,
Yeah.
but that has largely been reduced in two things. One is the rubber stamp of the executive, and the executive we are talking about an individual, Genome 7, because there's no executive. The country runs on the whims of an individual. Number two is that you have parliament reduced to another dimension of patronage. So, in summary, the parliament, like other institutions of the state of Uganda, is under captivity. And as such, it cannot perform the role that the framers of our constitution envisaged that it would play. Because of the political environment in this country. The other challenge, which is debatable, is even there has been a debate on the having a partisan speaker that is an active member of a parliamentary caucus of a political party, and the ability of that speaker to be a neutral arbiter to and to steer business of parliament without being biased. So that is in regard to the capacity or lack of it of our parliament to be able to play the role that the framers of the constitution envisaged that it would play. Number two, we have talked about those who say that NUP sent poor quality. I don't know what the comparison is, but you need to understand the history of the NRA, NRM. That one of the things that it has excelled at is demonizing opponents. In the early years of NRA and NRM, even because that time we were under what they called, NRM has largely been operating on deception, what they called broad-based, but in actual sense, it was bringing people from the other people just on board, not encompassing their ideas and so that people who would express dissenting views, they would say those are disgruntled people. And there was a team responsible for doing that. They said disgruntled. When PAFO emerged, they said this is Marwa group. But you see, the first people that became members of that group were from the ideological club of the NRM that had been praised as intellectuals.
Yeah.
But now they are saying this is inconsequential Marwa group of disgruntled people. So the NRM government, one of the things it does very well is demonizing opponents and labeling them. And so that explains why you hear sentiments, oh, so and so is mentally unstable. But the mentally unstable are these ones who are torturing people. The mentally unstable are these ones who are sanitizing torture and violation of human rights. And I want to come to the double standards of the leadership of parliament. That people have a quarrel outside parliament, and then it becomes something of importance to parliament. And the opposition, when they come and say, we would like to play a video of what happened at our party headquarters, the violation of human rights, the leadership of parliament says this is nonsense. And so you see that they are looking for any thread to label, to demonize, and discredit those that hold divergent views. The dictatorships, by their nature, one of the tools they use very well to keep people under captivity is deny them leadership. How do you deny people leadership? discredit their leaders, bring rape charges against Dr. Besigye, bring terrorism charges against Bobby Wine and these other MPs. Frame them, try to compromise those that you can compromise, intimidate others, that people remain without leadership. Because if they don't have leaders, then they cannot do anything. Even if there are millions of people with dissenting views, if they have no leadership, then they cannot make progress. And so the demonization and continued labeling speaks to that deliberate grand scheme to make sure that people have no leaders who will show them direction. And if you have, there have been incidents in Parliament involving members of Parliament from the NRM that there was the other day the Honorable Musinguzi was talking about when General Katumba boxed someone on the floor of Parliament and business continued. Now, what has brought the context of what is happening now is that the Honorable Zake went to a constituency and they say he used the words that were derogatory. But you see, President Museveni on record he said politics is about kuraba mukama. There's figurative language, there's metaphorical language. I know one of the most common words, phrases that people use to talk about those who have no conscience, those who move about. They say those are political prostitutes. So if on account of your conduct someone says you are a political prostitute, why should that become business of Parliament, that everything else you put it at halt and you focus on that? I agree that conduct of business in Parliament or anywhere else, conduct of politics generally, there should be decorum in conduct of politics.
Thank you.
But what I reject is cherry picking. That you can beat, you can rape, you can torture, you can deprive people, and that is decent and it's acceptable. That when I criticize a person using a language that that person finds unpalatable, then now I have I have unmasked the God. So I think the biggest problem is that dishonesty, the double standards, and actually what has emerged as the standard practice of Parliament, to pick on small things. That when there is a debate about something small, the NRMPs will go into frenzy. For 2 months, they will attend parties, they will go to talk shows and talk about that. When there are important discussions about the future of the country, then they are cowed and they are waiting for General Museveni to tell them what to do. There are so many issues. Roboa Hospital, money was lost. They are quiet. There are these cases of this. I saw the other day one of the NRM MPs saying, you are only talking about the disappearances in Uganda. Why are you not talking about violations in Upper? But they have not stopped you from raising them. But because you fear. But that is the nature of dictatorships. Dictatorships make sure that people don't focus on the important things, they focus on the small things. And unfortunately, these institutions that would help to cut the balance have been disempowered. That you have, if you want to be a speaker, you must go and beg the president to help you become one. And whoever is in that position knows he has been helped. That if you want to be a member of the Human Rights Commission, you have been an NRM MP, you have lost a seat, then you beg and lobby through people who can reach the president, then the next day you are a commission of human rights. Now, if it is him at the helm of violating human rights, you have no moral authority to call him out because you know that you are a beneficiary of his grace.
Absolutely. Council Eron, one of the things that Council Katana has spoken about is the video in Parliament that the leader of opposition was trying to play in order for Parliament to see what had transpired both at the airport, the Uganda International Airport, where the leader of the National Unity Platform, His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi, was, you know, I don't know what to call it, whether it was handpicking, whether it was, what do you call it, Katana?
Cherry.
Was your leader cherry picked?
No, he was brutally arrested.
Yeah, was not taken through the process of immigration.
He was grabbed physically and
So-
dragged.
Yes, so I think that the leader of opposition wanted to highlight that. Then also, of course, what had happened at the offices of the National Unity Platform on the Independence Day. So, according to parliamentary procedure, do they allow such videos to be played? Is there a precedent for such videos being played? If not, should they be there? Or was the speaker justified in denying these members the opportunity to play the video?
No, because he had been playing all videos that projected the opposition in a very unfriendly light, in a very ugly, harsh light. But when it came to videos that project them as victims of repression, as victims of injustice, then he cowardized. Indeed, recently, that deputy speaker said that for him, he wants to be realistic. He doesn't want people who follow things which are written. And now that is a very dangerous road for Taiba to drag us, because the constitution is written, and actually to govern where we need to govern basing on written instruments. But start wanting to govern us on whims and things we don't understand that are among us and cannot be defined, I think then you may as well resign the office of the deputy speakership so that people who can weather the storm of challenges that are inherent in the office of the deputy speaker under a military dictatorship can take over. It's the role of parliament to hold the executive in check, to check the excesses of government, to expose them, and to demand that they stop. It's the role of government, of parliament as a branch, to ensure that they make government functionaries, especially ministers that appear in that parliament, to account for the wrongs of government agencies, whether it is civil aviation, whether it is security agencies, and so on and so forth. When they fail in that role, they are failing us because they are there as the eyes of the people. And they should conduct their manner in a most transparent and dignified manner. So the issue of videos, really, so how do we know what they discussed? Because they have been showing everything. Actually, there is no video they are not showing.
Yeah, because
Except-
I asked that question
Except
just for purposes of avoidance of
Yes,
doubt
yes.
and clarity for our
Yes.
viewers, because there is a lot of miscommunication within public spaces. I think this is a platform for us to clarify that actually the rules of procedure that Parliament follows allows such videos to be played, so that
yes, they allow, and that is the norm.
exactly.
Not allowing a video to be played, you need very compelling reasons, and you need to explain you who is trying to stop the video, and you give very good reasons. And really, there was even no reason for not playing the video, except that it would embarrass the speaker's political party. That is the only reason.
And I mean,
but related
yeah.
to that, it is worse that it comes against the backdrop of showing a video whose sole intention was to project a non-parliamentary level discussion on private matters on some lady who was projected to be in the light she was projected. And I have a problem with this parliament. This is the 11th parliament.
Yes.
Its obsession with sex is mind-boggling. every time a matter of sex comes up,
But
the
you have
parliament
a- you
gets
have a-
excited.
You have a poem on it.
The whole reason we went to the constitutional court,
Yeah.
when you read that judgment,
Yeah.
the speaker, just because the words were used, included ejaculation, that's why she ran amok.
And in this particular case, the conclusion that what was said was in reference to sexual activity
Yeah.
was not on the part of the one who said it, but the ones who are complaining.
Yes, because I think there are
But,
shades of opinion
now
that
speaking
talk about
human
political prostitution.
Speaking human rights, would the words of the Honorable Zake Francis, which are in issue here, protected under the freedom of expression and yeah.
Yeah, of course. But before we go to the words of Zake,
Yeah.
one, you see the cherry picking he was talking about.
Okay.
You only want to pick on the opposition and harass them, including in parliament.
Yeah.
But someone who is in the ruling party cannot even be offended by mere words,
Yeah.
by mere allegory, by mere imagery.
Yeah.
You get me? Or even by a debate. You cannot even start debating. We have created a terrible precedent whereby you cannot even criticize the speaker. You know, at one time, it only used to be the first son and the first lady. But now it is going into even the speaker that you cannot talk about her. What kind of
Additionally, Hariss, the test as to whether this is protected speech,
Yes. Yes.
it would require that the offended party
Yes.
sues in defamation
Exactly.
the person
Exactly.
or report to police,
Yep.
and this private matter is pursued in that light. And if it is established by court
Yeah.
that indeed this went beyond protected speech,
Yes.
then it should get appropriate remedies. But now,
Yeah, exactly.
all the resources of parliament,
Exactly. Because in my own judgment, I don't find anything that is outside the protected speech of Honorable Zake as a citizen to warrant the expenditure of parliamentary resources that we have expended as a country.
Yeah, but also the trend we are taking of
Exactly.
monitoring parliamentary speech of parliamentarians on wedding parties, on funerals, or evening barbecues.
Exactly.
What do you want with members of parliament and their private talk? And if someone is in a cavalry having a good time, gets excited, or has been with Denis and got philosophical words and just decides to throw them around, and before then as he comes back to Kampala,
Then
because he's an MP,
he's being someone.
you find a house that is constituting itself into a kangaroo court.
Indeed.
soon they will start entertaining disputes of who has taken whose girlfriend.
No, they debated again. I told you the obsession about
Sex, yeah.
They were debating who is married to who. They even passed a resolution. It is on the Hansard of Parliament.
Incredible.
Just because of quarreling over a husband. That's what the European Parliament is obsession about.
Incredible.
They don't want to debate issues of national importance. Talk about sex and they are into a frenzy of real nonsense.
Incredible.
And the minister is Minister who?
The ministers in the cabinet, their resolution was ignored.
What was
the one for
marriage.
whom they were talking fraudulent marriage. The minister who? The one from
Namuganza.
Namuganza passes.
Imagine,
All right.
really honestly, I'm not an NRM guy, you get me? But really, why would you want to know whom Namuganza sleeps with? Whether, even if it was illegal.
And it is debated
Whether
on
it is
the floor of
fraudulent
parliament.
or- I mean, that's
All
not
right,
parliamentary business.
let me bring
We should
in Charity.
use our money. Remember,
Yeah.
these people are spending money on these discussions.
Yeah,
It's
of
not
course,
yes.
every minute.
Parliament is a
matters
public
because we
resource.
pay them.
A
Yes,
public
it's a
resource.
public
Use it reasonably.
Exactly.
You cannot just use parliament for your sex talk. Stop it.
Charity, what struck me the most is the fact that, when the vote was being taken on whether to show the video, of course, the purpose
The
was...
eyes have it.
Yeah, the eyes have it. I would ordinarily expect that human rights are non-partisan They are universal, they are all-encompassing, and whenever they are in threat, then your political shades don't matter. And so, Charity, what would be your comment about that and your expectation of Parliament to protect your rights?
I think I feel sad this day to have to discuss about Parliament in this light. Huh? And I don't think Eron is trivializing anything. Unfortunately, these things have happened on the floor of Parliament. But when you look at Article 79, in the broad sense of it, they're supposed to legislate for peace, for development, and for good governance. Now let us zoom in onto Zake and Honorable Juliet. What was there to legislate in that incident about peace, about development, and about good governance? On just that incident. Let us zoom in. I've just told you what the broad article tells them, because they start with the article of the Constitution before we have the Parliamentary Act. Exactly. Now, the Parliamentary Act draws from, and the rules of procedure also draw from the spirit of Article 79. What was developmental in the clash between Honorable Juliet and Honorable Zake in as far as Uganda's development, in as far as Uganda's good governance, and in as far as Uganda's peace is concerned? If you weigh it against that, it is clear that Parliament had lost the tide. Now, then we come to the second issue. And of course, I'm not going to exonerate Katana's friends for the question of decorum. I'm coming with a big whip for bad manners which have been imported into Parliament. Because if you look at the people who have been suspended in entire school, it was out of being rowdy. And if we continue with the House being like that, I have two schools of thought I have been toying with. The one he presented of Hobbes, and the one of John Locke. You know, Locke says we must balance. Hobbes says on the other side that no, if you have no sword, then your words are meaningless. And so the sword in this instance was what we saw the Honorable Speaker using. But when I'm going to kill a cockroach, do I get a tractor to run over a cockroach? I mean, I already have that power. I wield that power. Do I need a tractor to run over a cockroach? That's one of the things that got me a bit on the weighing scale of the question of how the Speaker handled the protest from the opposition. Now, the opposition has a voice it represents in Parliament.
Exactly.
There are people who sent them there and believe in them. Okay? Now they come and ask to play a video. So what if you played the video? So what? Because after all, when you go to Geneva, you're not going to tell them, shut the video, let it not run. Because remember, we have a universal peer review mechanism where we go to report about our state of human rights. And this will again be put in a report somewhere. And the Attorney General will have to appear in Geneva or UN Council on Human Rights to report on the state of Uganda after the 2026 elections. It will come up. It will be there. So when they're in Geneva and when they're in the UN Council, are they going to shut down? There will be no video running. There will be, you know, these are the things. That's why I said I was torn between two schools of thought. So if you know you're going to have to report about the state of human rights anyway, and objectively here you are the speaker. Yes, you have a side you belong to, but you're supposed to be a fair voice in Parliament. And you see, the question is the institution of Parliament. This is what we are now reflecting on. And if we just ignore these things and let them go, and I think that's why Eron is getting a bit irritated and saying, why is it we do not debate key issues, but we have degenerated into sex? Why? Why aren't we talking about our roads? Why aren't we talking about this corruption thing and see that we're really fixing it? Why aren't we talking about PDM, how far it has gone right now? Why aren't we talking about agriculture? Why aren't we talking about the environment and the change in the environmental space and climate change? And Why aren't we talking about the investors? Why aren't we talking about the tourists who are killed? And what it means for Uganda? Why are we spending time legislating on things that are not development, that are not good governance, that are not peace? That is what he's saying in a brief note. So, okay, back to the incident and sticking with it. So what if I was the speaker and I let them play their video? And then after they have played their video, yeah, I offend my boss, but on ground of John Locke, of where he says, if the people's views are not being represented, then do what? Riot. At which choice do I then now? When do I become Hobbes and when do I become John Locke? When do I choose to play with the stick of John Locke? So I'm asking, when does the question of balance come up? As a speaker, you're supposed to balance. And so we're supposed to see a delicate, intricate way in which you're balancing. And I asked you the question of, if I have to kill a cockroach, do I drive a whole tractor to kill it?
To demonstrate power.
I am the speaker.
And
I have all the power.
You're already the speaker.
I have all the rules of procedure. I have the power.
The speaker is an agent.
Exactly.
So at my
He's an
choice,
agent of a person who wants to entrench fear,
Okay.
demonstrate power, and
and the
invincibility.
choice of my whims. No, by the way, I want to disagree with that, because President Museveni,
Yeah.
there used to be a woman called Cecilia Ogwal.
Yeah.
She used to shout at the president, say many things, you know, criticize him. One day, President Museveni met her on a conference in northern Uganda, and he chose to hug her. He disempowered her with a hug. So there are times when he lets people shout and
The
go
master
and-
has a discretion.
And so yes,
And
he
the
has
agent doesn't
discretion.
have.
And this is what I am saying. So if your master has been a scholar of John Locke to a certain extent, and he has seen the power of balance,
Yeah.
So maybe if I can,
why
Just 1 minute.
why
we
then
need-
are
No,
the
no, I mean, sorry, Charity.
Yeah.
Yeah, raise your
you
point.
see the thread that cuts through when you interact with most of these people,
Yeah.
the fear they have is not to be misunderstood.
Okay.
So they don't have the discretion that the master has. So because for them, they are always in their minds
Suspecting
will this make him unhappy or will this one make him happy? So they fear to make him unhappy, and many times they end up doing even maybe things he would not sanction, but because they think that's what he wants.
Fair
so
enough.
at the thought of an institution degenerating into nothing, and it is a democratic institution, and we are saying it is driven by the constitution, and we do not have separation of power in Uganda. We don't have it. We've never achieved it. The constitution does not also empower us to have it. What we have is checks and balances. Okay? That is what we have, and that is what we've been running. So in the breadth of the incident that happened in Parliament, I think the better option for us and for the sanctity of that house was to have been fair, because the right to a fair hearing is non-derogable, to have been fair, to have had the opposition. Listen to them. It doesn't take away anything from you.
Yeah, I would like to bring in Dr. Denis now, but I want to first push Aliro. I want to push back Aliro on your point when you said you don't agree with the conduct of the honorable members, the five who were suspended.
Yeah.
And without sounding as if I'm siding with them, yeah? If you put yourself in their shoes, they are in the minority, they have constituents to represent, and they perceive that they are being treated unfairly. Apart from resigning and resigning their jobs, how else would they fight for their space to represent, to be heard by the speaker?
So they were stopped, okay? And the speaker suspended them. How did the public get to know what it is they wanted to play? They put it on social media. The leader of opposition put it on social media after it had failed to go onto the floor of Parliament. And he said, here is the video that Parliament refused to play. And the public now knows the video that was not played. Are there options to how they behaved in Parliament? There are significant options to how they behaved in Parliament. And you see, because decorum is key to Parliament, for us to trivialize it by saying, no, they were entitled, let them protest this way. Yes, even when you're protesting, there is a manner in which you protest in Parliament. And I want you to follow through.
We earlier discussed the right to mention the right to demonstrate peacefully.
Even assembly.
Is there a better place to demonstrate peacefully other than Parliament?
Moreover, they were not beating anybody.
They were not beating anybody. They were
That's
just...
what the Parliament's world over.
Yes,
That's the direction protest
exactly. We've watched the mother of all parliaments. Yes, that's Westminster, the UK Parliament. And whenever there is whenever there is disgruntlement and members who are offended feel like expressing their disgruntlement, especially if they are in the minority, they stand up and protest. As long as the protest is peaceful, not like one where we saw General Katumba, Honorable General Katumba punching someone. And in that case, there was not even a suspension. There's no nothing for Honorable General Katumba. These 5 members of Parliament who were suspended, they were standing in their seats, peacefully expressing their disgruntlement.
The speaker kept calling out at them, and they were not listening to him. If you were speaking to me right now, Ocampo, and I kept shouting back, you're saying something, no, I keep shouting back, is there decency?
But we need to know, Charity,
so
what is
me,
the background for this?
The better protest, no, Eron, no.
When the
we must be able to carry ourselves a certain way. If you look at the character of Honorable Zake, both in the House and out of the House, he has been rowdy. What you call proper rowdy. You know people who you see and you're like,
if you grip a man, expect him to be rowdy. If you blind a man, expect him to be rowdy. You need to know what has driven someone to this level.
I do not have to be as rowdy as that way. I can still be rowdy in my way.
No, because you have not expressed his experience.
You have
not been tortured.
We have the leader of opposition. We have the leader of opposition. I have been tortured, Eron.
I said his style.
Maybe not his style, but I have been tortured. I have been tortured.
Just
I
one
was
point.
tortured in 2021 when I was locked up for no reason.
Just one point.
Just make the point.
So do you see the rowdiness I'm talking about? If I continue, will we have semblance here?
The essence of protest is that you are able to shine light on the injustice, on the unfairness. The country is now debating the video that was not played and what have you, because of that protest that you are calling rowdiness.
No, not because of the protest, because of the video that the leader of opposition put out. And secondly, those MPs had a chance. They can move out of Parliament and address the media. And tell them this is what we disagree with, and they've done it over and over.
You are pigeonholing forms of protest. We are dealing with an unconventional dictatorship. People must come up with new ways of protesting. As long as they are non-violent, you must be creative in your protest. The whole idea of advocacy is to entice public attention to your cause. As long as it is peaceful, do not listen to a certain charity. Listening for you, the forms of protest, in which you should protest.
Listen to a certain charity in as far as decorum is concerned, because this is Parliament. It has standards, it has rules, there is decorum. It's different from when we are on the street and we are shouting out on the street where there is no one who is
decorum when someone is beating you.
Decorum starts with the speaker.
I agree. You could still paint him in a bad picture without necessarily.
No, he's painting himself in a bad picture. It doesn't need anyone paint him.
In a football match, you will not tell me that because the referee is so unfair we have decided we're going to carry this ball and we have declared ourselves the winner. It can't happen.
No, they
All
didn't
right.
declare
That's
themselves. All they
Eron
said
and
was
Jeremy.
that there is a fall on us,
we
and
shall-
you are refusing to
we shall
accept this
we
fall.
shall go on to
And
that
we shall
particular point.
draw the attention of
We
this
shall
fall
continue that
until-
particular point.
They exposed the biased nature of the speaker.
We shall. Yeah, let's bring it.
Decorum.
Let's bring in Dr. Denis on that particular point.
Yeah.
Charity argues that there was lack of decorum.
Yes.
Members of the NUP and some members of the public generally believe that the kind of protest as exhibited by the members of National Unity Platform, the 5 of them who were suspended, should be protected by the rules of Parliament and by the constitutional rights generally. Some say that, would argue that if they had done that maybe 3 consecutive sessions of Parliament, that would have been justified. But for the Speaker of Parliament to suspend them after, exercising just a few minutes of maybe picketing and so forth was high-handedness. What's your comment?
Well, I think on one hand, we have inherited an institution called Parliament as a branch of government, which maybe we've not even understood or implemented the way it's supposed to be. I'm raising that the Parliament, we also call it August House. Yeah. If you check out the meaning of August, especially from its Latin origin, it is something that is revered. It is something that is sacred. It's something that is admirable and inspires respect. And that's why the people who occupy that house are called honorable members. People are supposed to attract honor. Now, a member of Parliament has gone into a constituency and has started ill-talking the very person that those people voted for. Are those words attracting honor? Are they attracting reverence? Are they attracting dignity? That August House has a presiding officer, and that presiding officer is the Speaker. And the Speaker has the obligation and the mandate to protect the sacredness of the August House. There is an element of demonstration that they are talking about, and the Speaker is saying, okay, on the first incident when they moved out, he said, Honorable Leader of Opposition, you know how we conduct business. By the time you reach the decision of moving out, at least you should have discussed this issue with the Speaker and it is known. Maybe they wanted the surprise effect, okay? We are talking about demonstration. They wanted the surprise
enemies should
effect.
dictate how they challenge you.
No. Let me make my point, Benjamin.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying that this house has a presiding officer, and the presiding officer is empowered by the rules on how it is managed, which are the rules of procedure. You get it? And he says procedurally, we should have, but again, even in spite of that, he said, okay, demonstration is within your right, and I cannot stop you from moving out. And peacefully, they moved out. Are we together?
Yes,
In the
indeed.
first incident. And they reached out and they addressed the press, which is talking about. Now, in the very incident we are talking about, where people decided to demonstrate by obstructing the business of the house. If you are in the shoes of the Speaker who is presiding, do you surrender the house to the protesters? As Charity said, he kept saying, honorable members, let's listen to each other. Even he mentioned them by name. Honorable so-and-so, let's do this. Honorable so-and-so, let's do this. And in his wisdom, at that particular time, as a disciplinary measure, he says,
The lack of it this time.
whether it is the lack of it, he says, okay, I am invoking my powers given to me by this, our own rule, to suspend you. Whether it was high-handed,
but
yes.
doctor, to disrupt you,
Yes.
then how do you respond with those who argue that without members disrupting a little bit, like they did, then they can never be heard whenever they are disgruntled, because they are in the minority.
You see, one of the characteristics of the 11th Parliament, I've had people accuse Mpuga, the leader of opposition, of being close to the Speaker. Meaning there has been a working relationship between the leader of opposition and the office of the Speaker. And in fact, to that extent, for me, both Anite and Tayewa should be given some credit. They have created some space. But now it goes back to what they are talking about, the question of protest and the question of advocacy. You know, when we are in the typical
protest is an effect.
In the typical advocacy, you know, we have different approaches even to advocacy. The dominant approach has been confrontational advocacy, where you want to stand up and shout and be heard. But remember, we are saying we are living under a military dictatorship. They are the masters of violence. If you want to test them on a tool where they are superior than you, they are going to defeat you. And that's why others are saying, no, instead of only thinking about confrontational, can we also do non-confrontational advocacy?
Doctor, maybe you have to clarify that not all confrontation methods are violent.
Exactly.
In fact, most non-violent means are even confrontational.
Yes, like papers like those. But for me, I'm talking about this incident where...
Yeah, but Doctor, what I would like you in the charity to highlight is the fact that, first of all, these honorable members, this is, I think, they are past half the term of office, no? So 2.5 years, past 2.5 years of Parliament, they have not been protesting. Yet the matter upon which they were protesting has been persistent for the last 2.5 years, right? Yes. Not only has it been ignored, it is fundamental.
Yes.
Because we are talking about protection of human rights and freedoms. These human rights and freedoms that they were fighting for, have been ignored for the last 2.5 years. Meaning that they have deployed other
countless people
exactly. So they are saying, look, we have used all the avenues, diplomacy of Mr. Mpuga that you talked about, and all this, and it has not worked. Now they are saying, all right, what we have is to disrupt, create a little bit of a drama, attract the attention of the country to the problem. Because, you know, I think that to have, I think this is according to criminal law, that to have one innocent person inside the bars, to have liberty of one innocent person taken away, you'd rather have 100 thieves on the streets. That's how liberty of people is very important. That's why how human rights are very important. Now, having said that, Doctor, would you still sustain the argument that the 5 suspended members of Parliament acted unhonorable?
My last bit of argument was to highlight about that injustice.
All right.
The Speaker has the discretion to say this one should be played and this one should not be played. And that's the double standard and the injustice that these people have been talking about. Now, coming to this last question, of course, now it becomes, you know, a difficult situation at that particular moment. I already called it a military dictatorship, and I don't see a lot of hope or expectations in the Parliament of Tayewa and Anite. They go there to legislate what their boss wants and to conduct them in a manner that is going to debase the opposition and inflict all that kind of damage. But as an analyst, should we surrender the August House to chaos and to disorder and to collapse of business? I would rather we preserve the little we have instead even of squandering it. And for me, that's why I'm saying there are many other modes of demonstration. The leader of opposition could have said, we are going to abstain from Parliament for this whole month.
And it hasn't worked. They have used it before. It hasn't worked.
No. How long did it take? They will reach them out immediately and they will find ways of bringing them back. They have moved, they have absconded once or twice. I want the leader of opposition saying, for this whole month, we are not going to attend even a single thing.
Dr.
And
Denis,
we've moved out.
Dr. Denis, the Parliament of Uganda can operate very well without the members of NUP
I don't
because
think,
the
I
speaker
don't
always
think
have
the leader of opposition,
always
they are
have-
chairing the accountability committees, they are part of their
They
of
chair
their
almost
approval.
all
They chair all
committees
those
in
committees.
Parliament.
If the
So
activities
they
of those committees are not going on, that parliament is not going to continue sitting.
You already
They
said
will
that,
find means
you already
of
said
reaching
that
out
this
to
is a
them.
military. You already highlighted that.
For me, that
Let
would
me-
have
let me
a
tell you.
greater international effect
Let me tell
than
you,
than
Ocampo.
fighting on the stage
Yeah.
of parliament.
I think to also just dig in a bit deeper.
Yeah.
Sometimes we want to take one route that we know and is easy for us. But sometimes it's good to not take the known route and take the unknown route. These people have used guerrilla tactics. You can also be a gorilla. But let me illustrate with an American incident. When America first attacked Iran, they lost miserably in that attack, very miserably. That time it was Carter who was the president of the United States. And so when they lost miserably in that war, they went back onto the drawing board. They asked themselves, why did we lose the war? And Carter, by the way, the Americans voted him out because they said we can never have such a hopeless president who can't even win a simple war, while our 52 Americans are locked up by the Iranians. And since then, America and Iran have been looking at what is the finest moment when we can fight. They're looking for that moment. And those are many, many years ago, from 1979 to date. Those are about 42, 43 years ago. Now, they learned three things. One, their aviation, in terms of their army, the people they use in the army, they trained good pilots who fly around with their planes. They learned also that when they are going out for war, in a particular zone, they first study the climate of that area and know how to deal with the issues that will come up there. So what has the opposition learned from this one? After they have had all these many protests, but it's not the first time they have walked out. They've walked out on Anita. Did it change so much?
No.
Exactly.
And that's why they are now protesting in Parliament.
Even now when they protest, in Parliament,
Resistance is not an event.
Will it change so much? Exactly, Katana. Katana, it's a journey. Therefore, because it
So
is
we
a
cannot
journey,
start using incidents to discredit an
because
approach.
it is a journey, sit down then, review what has been achieved, what has not been achieved, and what can be done differently to attain certain things. For me, one of the solutions that should be happening now, there's an opportunity in 2026. Of course, the electoral process has been bastardized in this country, and we know the reasons around the elections and everything. But the more we practice, the better for the citizens to understand that there is something called an election, and maybe one day we'll arrive there.
All right.
For me, the process should be now a focus on shifting numbers so that you have more numbers, because you're continually not going to be hard. Put your energies in getting more of those numbers in. Instead of 100, have 200. Think about the plan.
You know, Charity and colleagues on the panel, one of the biggest challenges I've faced hosting this show is the tools of analysis I should use while assessing the performance of Parliament. Because the available tools assume the normal functioning Parliament, and yet Comrade BK has told us that this Parliament, and I think many commentators have come to the same conclusion, that this Parliament doesn't function according to the framework as envisaged under the Constitution. So sometimes when we analyze, what should be, what should not be, it's hard to, to avoid, sounding unreal. I think that if a Honorable Zake were here on the show, he would tell us that all you said, we've already tried it, and we have been preserving the decorum. We would like to preserve the decorum.
For example, the speaker wants to be engaged. He has been engaged for, right now there is a call from NUP to have him reshuffled. Partly because he has been too diplomatic, even by my expectations. You get me? So now these NUP MPs are seeing what she's talking about 2026. their patience is going to run out.
All right.
Her patience has already run out on our approach. But that is the test of leadership. You see, resistance and liberation. Never an event. It's always a journey of ups and downs. Even from the biblical times of Moses. When the children of Israel in the desert, he said, at least take us back. At least take us back. Because you have delayed to take us.
All right, I said that because in the last 5 minutes of this show, I would like us to touch a little bit on reform. I mean, you ably said that this parliament doesn't operate normally and it can't operate normally for reasons which we've all agreed on, that it's under the remote control of someone. I hope the viewers do agree. So that being the case, then what is the way forward? And we start with you, Doctor, and then we conclude with Councillor Katana.
The biggest challenge is we keep doing the same things, and of course hoping that at the end we might get some different results. We've held bad elections. The courts have ordered that reforms be made, and the reforms have not been done. We have not. When Honorable Mao was appointed as Minister of Justice through that pact, he was talking about the constitutional review. He was talking about Justice and Reconciliation Commission. Nothing is coming out. So unless and until the basics have been addressed, unfortunately, the vicious circle of protest and confrontation is going to continue. And when you are protesting against the masters of violence, then we are not going to get the best out of this. And that's why I was inclined to defend Tayewa, to protect the little that is in the parliament.
So I think that Parliament should go back to the creed of legislating for development, for peace and good governance. In the broad sense of good governance, we've talked about it and said that the Constitution allows for voices of dissent, it allows for opinion, and you also have to recognize that every representative in Parliament was elected by a group of people. So even suspending that member of Parliament or denying them to appear in Parliament, you're denying the people who trusted that member of Parliament to represent their views from being in Parliament. So there is something that you are playing around with. And as much as you have the power, you have the mandate, you also have to know how to use that power and mandate to espouse fairness, which is still constitutionally provided for as a non-derogable right. And from the side of the opposition, I think it is time to keep reorganizing, rethinking, and acting a bit different from the known script. Because this is a script that we all know, and this is what you always do whenever you're in disagreement.
Councillor Eron.
Very interesting. So one, we are in a military dictatorship. And by definition, it does not allow any space for civic activism, for fundamental human rights. That's why, indeed, just because someone contested against the president, his supporters, many died. There is no accountability. Many are still being harassed by his military. And it is not even supposed to be talked about in what? In Parliament. The leader of opposition cannot return to Uganda in peace. Even his passport cannot be stamped. And this is a trend, not even just 1 day off. The SJ has even a judgment. He's supposed to be paid around 10 million from a very conservative judge who should have given like 100 million. Get me? So we have a uniquely problematic situation. Someone pretending what he called the pseudo-election, or rather democracy. I call it cosmetic democracy when I'm trying to be polite, but when I'm, which most times I am honest, I say this is a dictatorship and of a military kind. So a dictatorship allows very little room for normal modes of organizing against it. In apartheid South Africa, ANC tried very hard to stick to non-violence, but they failed. Hence the Umukute Wosuzwe. They had to organize militarily and come back to a negotiating table. Once there was a military counterweight to the apartheid regime, then both sides realized that this is going to be a stalemate. Now let's talk. And eventually they ended with one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. And they have a democracy where their leaders do more daring things than the people they want to. I mean, the Zakis are doing nothing, to be honest, compared to what is it called? EFFS. So, and that is for the ordinary people. That was the standard expected of NUP MPs, because that's all they can do. They are not going to pass a bill. Their duty is to expose the government's ills, ensure that they expose corruption, ensure that they get more reports from these ministers, and as he said, as they are saying, we must think of creative ways of protest. Even come in parliament with T-shirts and after undress, so that you see the message. You get me? Get more creative, get more bold, be more courageous, because you're dealing with a vicious enemy.
Fair enough. Katana.
The first and foremost is for everyone to realize that the state of captivity that we are in does not affect only the opposition. The opposition is only leading the charge. Number two is that Parliament, which is also under captivity, is incapable of passing any reforms that will legislate Museveni out of power. Number three is that Museveni, who controls Parliament, controls the judiciary, cannot legislate himself out of power. The solution is in building civic competence through all avenues. If you are a pastor, if you are a civil society person, if you are a lecturer, if you are a farmer, you must fold the sleeves and build resistance. Dictatorships crumble on dictatorships, or on pressure. That's the only time that will compel them to go into discussions and negotiations on how to transition from dictatorship to democracy. There's no dictator who gives up power through reforms. There's no dictator who gives up power through goodwill without pressure. So the only antidote to what we are facing now is for the people of Uganda to rise up and stand firm and build pressure that will compel General Museveni and his people, especially his family, because they're the ones with the power. The rest are just victims like all of us, that they can negotiate with these people, that at least they allow us to live in peace. We are going to allow democracy to operate in Uganda.
Thank you very much. Human rights and freedoms, which are essential to the dignity of every human being, are God-given and are supposed to be protected jealously by everyone. Like the British citizens who more than 800 years ago came together to push for their rights to be respected, for the right to dignity, right to due process, right to fair trial. As Ugandans, as a Ugandan citizen, it is your right to work through means available to you to make sure that your rights as a citizen, but rights of every Ugandan citizen are protected. Council Katana, Council Eron, Council Charity, Dr. Denis, it's been a pleasure. Thank you indeed. And to our hosts, to our viewers, it's always a pleasure to have you join us for this conversation. Please leave a comment in the comment section so that we can continue this conversation going. I've been your host, Hariss Akampulira. Until next Saturday, from me and the crew, it's a bye-bye, and we wish you a nice weekend.